Hello and welcome. We're very glad you're with us today for our webinar, Employee Retention Credits, ERC, and COVID Stimulus for Churches. This very special event is coming to you from Church Executive and Stenson Tamaddon. I'm Judy Victor, publisher of Church Executive.
And I'm Rayanne Slaybaugh, Editor-in-Chief of Church Executive.
Church Executive is the go-to business resource for senior pastors, executive pastors, and business administrators at the largest churches and megachurches in America. We reach more than 53,000 of the most influential church leaders in the country. And now I'd like Rayanne to tell you a bit more about our esteemed partner, Stenson Tamaddon, and to introduce today's presenters. Rayanne?
Thanks, Judy. We are so honored to have Stenson Tamaddon as our partner for this important webinar. Offering top quality compliance and specialized accountancy services related to the CARES Act, Stenson Tamaddon has helped more than 2,100 businesses retain $500 million in stimulus funding. Its proprietary industry-leading platform has been licensed by nearly 200 accounting and CPA firms coast to coast. Stenson Tamaddon's professional done-for-you submission services and comprehensive supporting schedules are designed to ensure your organization's loan forgiveness application is audit-ready and accepted the first time. In today's webinar, we'll be talking about how your church can get up to $33,000 per employee in Employee Retention Credit or ERC funds, how to qualify for these funds, even if your church did well during COVID, how a Lutheran church and school was able to secure $664,000 of stimulus, and how white glove service can get your church the funds it needs. We will be setting aside several minutes for a Q&A session at the end, so throughout the presentation, please submit your questions using the questions button. Now to introduce our presenters. Leading the presentation today is Stenson Tamaddon CEO Eric Stenson, who spent most of his career in the healthcare technology space. After selling Provider Tech, a patient communication and care delivery platform, he became head of technology for a group of radiology and medical imaging clinics. Returning to Arizona, Stenson assumed the head of technology role for two major healthcare centers. After these entities received more than $2 million in PPP funds, he created a software-first approach to PPP loan forgiveness and ERC tax credits, co-founding Stenson Tamaddon. Eric is joined today by Stenson Tamaddon partner Aaron Tamaddon and Senior Vice President Brian Rowland. Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Judy, and I wanted to start by thanking everyone at Church Executive and, of course, the participants from all of the churches for joining us this morning. To start the presentation, I just wanted to take 30 seconds to have a moment of silence. I know that I'm very blessed, as many of our participants are, to sit here today on the 11th floor looking out over Phoenix. Well, in other parts of the world, there's conflict going on, and I think we can all pray for peace and health and happiness to everyone, and may the Lord help all people in the world have the same prosperity that we enjoy here in the United States. And having that and talking about prosperity, I guess we're going to talk this morning a little bit about employee retention tax credits, and we wanted to introduce those to the participants. Some of you may be familiar with them, some of you may be looking for more information. Others may have never heard of an employee retention tax credit before, so we wanted to talk about this important stimulus program. We wanted to let everyone on this webinar know that if you're a church, you qualify. Even if you have been blessed by your congregants and have done well during the pandemic, your church still qualifies for this money and can access this money and put it to good use. And then, of course, the third thing that we want to do is we actually want to connect the dots and help you understand how it is that your church can receive a check in the mail for this money, so that we're not just talking about an abstract concept of tax credits, and that we're actually talking about a check that you can deposit into the bank. First, at a very high level, the employee retention credits were part of the CARES Act. Many of the participants on this webinar are probably familiar with PPP loans. Those were also created in the CARES Act. Employee retention credits are kind of the sister program to PPP. And what employee retention credits do is they provide your church with a check for up to $33,000 for every employee that you've had in 2020 and 2021. And we'll talk a little bit today about how that exact number is calculated. When I talk about tax credits, I always like to address the 800-pound gorilla, which is that a lot of people see tax credits as something that are a little bit mysterious, very confusing, and there never seems to be this easy button. Certainly with the PPP loans, it was very easy. There was a 2-page application. You submitted it to the bank. You got an ACH for quite a bit of money. In the case of the tax credits, it is a little bit more complex to claim, but it's something that our firm makes very easy, and that we take great pride in delivering that easy button so that you really don't have to think about it. And to that point, I want to talk about one of our clients. We have many clients throughout the United States, but I thought this one was particularly relevant to the webinar today, which was a Lutheran church. And we first assisted this church with their PPP loan forgiveness. They had a PPP loan for about $600,000. And after we did the PPP loan forgiveness, we were able to file 3 amended returns for 2020 and get the church another $327,000. So that's the $600,000 in the PPP, and then another $327,000, almost $330,000 in a check for the ERC. And that's just for the 2020 calendar year. For 2021, for this year, we believe that we're going to be able to deliver to this church over $1 million. So with that type of money, when you combine the PPP, the 2020 ERC, and the 2021 ERC, you're talking about $2 million to a relatively small church. The amount of good that they're going to be able to do in their ministry with that is incredible, from delivering new child care services and daycare services, being able to expand their reach within the community, help people in need, stabilize the church financials, create long-term funds. This is money that is really going to help this church, and I'm sure could, many of the participants on this call, if they could get another $500,000 or $1 million in funding for their church, there are many things that they could do, from repairs to the building to increasing programs. So I wanted to show that this is kind of the bottom line. So Q2, they got a $142,000 check back. Q3, they got a $46,000 check, and Q4 of 2020, $140,000. These are checks that come. You've probably all seen these ERC checks. So these come directly to the church. You do not have to pay any tax as a church to get these checks. So these come directly to you. It's not like a tax credit that you take against some sort of tax that would be due. So let's talk about how we got to that number. The law has 2 components to it. It has a 2020 component, which is 50% of what you've paid each employee, and it's capped at $5,000 over the year. So if you've paid an employee $40,000 in 2020, you get $5,000 that employee. If you've paid them $12,000 over 2020, you get $5,000. If you paid them $1,000 in 2020, you get $500. For 2021, the government is doing 70% of what you pay each employee, and so that would be $7,000 per quarter. So if you pay more than $10,000 per quarter in wages, you get $7,000, and again, you would just take 70% of whatever it is that you're paying your employees. If you combine the $28,000 in 2021 with the $5,000 in 2020, you get $33,000 per employee. one of the things that my partner Aaron and I set out to do at the beginning of this, and I think I said that when we talk to a lot of churches, we talk to fitness studios, we talk to businesses, we talk to nonprofits, we find that these tax credits are always, you know, one step beyond the reach of people, just because of, you know, sometimes the level of sophistication that it takes to file returns. A lot of the CPAs will only do the annual returns. They don't do the payroll returns that these are required on. They can't do the calculations. And we said, we want to make this different. We want to give people a one-stop shop where they have an easy button and that they can come to us, they can give us their payroll data and, you know, sign a real simple letter, and we help them get a check back. So we really pride ourselves on done-for-you services. We have staff accountants that walk you through the entire process. They start with the screen share to collect payroll data. We prepare all the returns. We are registered with the IRS as a paid preparer. We file those quarterly returns and get you the check back. This does not impact what your CPA or any of your financial advisors do in terms of any annual returns that you would prepare for the church. This is purely a payroll return. One question we often receive is whether ERC is the same as PPP. And the answer is it's a different program. You can have both a PPP loan, you can have a PPP second draw loan, and you can also have ERC, employee retention credits. So this is money that your church is able to claim as stimulus funding on top of and in addition to any of the PPP funds that you've already received. Unlike PPP, this money does not have any restrictions on the use of proceeds, which makes it from a board level very interesting because, as I'm sure many of you know, when you have different funds that come in, sometimes there are restrictions on how you can use that money, and you have to account for it accordingly. With the ERC funds, there's no restrictions on it. So if you want to use it just as a reserve for the church, you're able to do that. If there are specific programs that you would like to fund, whether it's, you know, music or education or outreach or childcare, we've seen churches provide counseling to people and make grants or address homelessness. Whatever your church sees fit in its ministry, and however it wants to use the funds, it can. If it thinks that constructing a new playground would make sense, it could do that. So there's no restrictions on how you use this money. So however your board and your ministry sees fit, you can use it like that. So definitely different from PPP. And I think in terms of the realms of possibilities that people and churches can use this for in terms of doing good in the world, it can make a world of difference, this money. You can claim both the ERC and the PPP or PPP2. There are some restrictions around how you allocate payroll. So again, I talked a little bit earlier, and I said, 50% of the first $10,000 can go towards ERC. What our firm does is we determine on the payroll how that payroll goes between the PPP program and the ERC program if you are taking advantage of both. So there's some behind the scenes schedules that need to be created and calculations that need to be done to avoid what's known as double dipping. So as you pay employees, we create an Excel workbook that designates payroll dollars towards one of the programs, either ERC or PPP, and we make sure that we maximize the money going to your church. So two different programs. You can have both PPP and ERC, and there's just a little bit of calculations to do. I'm not going to get really into the weeds on this call on how that's done. In this case, I said, let's say your church has 30 employees at a $45,000 annual salary. If you look at a month like May, you'd have $100,000 of payroll, and we would split it between the PPP and the ERC to claim the wages. This is all stuff that our staff accountants do from our standpoint and from your standpoint. We give you the easy button. You don't really have to worry about this. We just create all the documentation that's required so that you can claim these various credits. One of the things that we see a lot of questions around is qualification. We talk to churches and synagogues and nonprofits and other businesses on a daily basis. We have dozens and dozens of conversations. We quite frequently find that people will self-disqualify their institution or their business from ERC credits. They just feel like it's too good to be true, or they feel like that they didn't have a revenue dip, and as a result of not having a revenue dip, that it's not something that they're going to qualify for, or they feel like they didn't have a partial suspension of operations because they were an essential business, and they start creating in their mind reasons why it is that they don't qualify. The good news, I'm here today to tell you, every single person, an institution on this call as a church, 100% qualifies for the employee retention credits. Again, that's regardless of if your income as an institution went up or down. That is not relevant. The ERC program does have one qualification that you can, or a pathway to qualification through income. If you have a substantial reduction in gross receipts, that is a qualification. Another way to qualify, and this is why we can say that all churches on this call qualify for these employee retention credits, is what's known as a partial suspension of operations. And so let's talk for a minute about what it is that means. And in short, what it means is that your church was impacted by a government order. And so that could be a reduction in capacity in terms of, the number of congregants that can be, in the sanctuary at once and attending services. So if you were limited in capacity of the number of people that could join, or if you had to increase the physical distancing between congregants and members while doing prayer, if your church went to virtual, from in-person to virtual services, that would qualify. If your church had to go outdoors, that would qualify. If your church took additional time for cleaning and sanitation, particularly in daycare and school areas, that qualifies. And this doesn't have to be, if your church has a daycare and a day school and also does weekend services, only one of those has to be impacted by a government order for everything to qualify. If your church has a separate entity for its school, as an affiliate, the school would automatically qualify. So lots of ways. We have dozens and dozens of kind of check boxes that we can use with churches around and schools around the partial suspension. Again, talking about reduction in capacity, reduction in capacity to virtual learning, virtual services, cleaning and sanitation, all of those types of things qualify. And of course, if your ministry does any travel or outreach, whether it's in the community or elsewhere, if those things stopped, those qualify you as well. So very broad-based qualifications. We're very confident that your church does qualify. Don't just go in and say, hey, we've done well as a congregation. Our members have continued their donations, so we don't think that this fits for us. It's available to both nonprofit and for-profit institutions. So if you're, if the church is a nonprofit and it has, an operating subsidiary that's doing, some real estate or cafe or daycare that happens to be for-profit, It doesn't matter. Both of those entities would qualify. You don't need to have any net income or positive income or anything like that for qualification. So it doesn't matter if you're nonprofit or for-profit, both qualify. You do have to have employees that are paid on a W-2 basis. So if everyone that's affiliated with your church is paid on a 1099 basis, that will not work. So you actually do need to have people employed by your church and receiving W-2 wages. And then, of course, the fourth part, as we talked about, was that you've had some impact. And you can claim the credits as an institution in any quarter in which that impact has affected your institution, your church. So we are very comfortable that throughout all of 2020, everyone on the call has been impacted. Certainly the first and second quarters of 2021, we've seen some partial suspensions and restrictions on seating capacity and additional time for cleaning and sanitation and items like that. We'll see how the third and the fourth quarter go. Certainly, if things continue as they do now, I think churches will be in a good position to claim this for the third and fourth quarter of 2021 as well. Few other common kind of objections and misconceptions that we see as we talk to different institutions. Again, one of the biggest is that people believe that since their revenue did not decline, that they're not eligible. Whether your revenue went up or down, you are eligible. If your revenue is down, this is certainly a lot of money that can help your church do good and recover financially. And if you've been fortunate to have donations keep coming in and a strong endowment, this money can be used to expand your ministry and boost programs and do even more outreach and good for the community. So certainly don't let this money sit and don't take it and not take advantage of it just because you're doing well. There's always people in need that we can help with this money. If you have the PPP, you're still eligible. We see some churches that think they have to choose between the PPP and the ERC. When the legislation originally came out, that was true. Congress has since rescinded that restriction, and you can have both a PPP and claim the ERC credits. So certainly don't think that you're blocked just because you have a PPP. A lot of institutions that we talk to also get confused on how this credit is claimed, and they think, okay, well, we have a CPA firm that we work with that files annual returns for us, and they're going to get us the money on those, or that our CPA firm is certainly aware of these credits and is going to claim them for us. We work with hundreds of CPAs all across the country. Most CPAs do not do this type of work. This is very specialized economic consulting around stimulus funds, and it's just really not within their wheelhouse. One of the core elements of any engagement that we do is that we like to talk to any CPA or financial accounting firm that you work with so that they're aware of what it is that we are doing. Another thing that we see is people say, well, I didn't really suspend operations. All of my employees continued to work and provide services to the ministry, and so we were never really shut down. You still qualify. So the rules do not require you to completely shut down. All of your employees could continue to work. They could continue to provide, whatever services they do, whether it's administrative or teaching or leadership. All of those positions qualify, even if they continued to provide services to your institution. One of the other things that we see is people say, well, we weren't suspended. I know we had some shutdown orders in place and some capacity restrictions, but what we did is we adapted and we went to Zoom and we started doing services virtually and we started doing distance education. All of those are qualifiers. Those items are precisely what the IRS means by a partial suspension, that you suspended in-person services, you went to virtual services, you reduced capacity, you went outdoors. So even if you continue to operate, it's those modifications that are what are known as a partial suspension. So the word suspension as it's defined in the law is different than what a lot of people would think of suspension meaning stopping. So in the way that the regulations define suspension, they mean it much more around changes to the operation when you look at it into context. For those looking to claim the credits, it is a tax return, a quarterly tax return that has to get filed. This is probably beyond the scope of what most CFOs or controllers or treasurers or business managers or leaders of a church would be comfortable preparing in-house. There certainly is some calculations. There are a lot of calculations that need to be done around the payroll. We specialize in this as an accounting services and technology firm. We don't recommend trying to amend 941s on your own. There's hundreds of pages of rules and very particular instructions on how to do it. We are here to help you, to give you that easy button so that we can fill out all those forms for you, and we can make sure that the calculations are right and accurate. We actually wrote a software platform to bring your payroll directly into our platform to generate those forms. On the third page, there's a big box, and the IRS says, tell us why it is that you're amending this return. For example, one of the things that we see a lot of people that don't do this is they just write, well, I'm filing the amended return to claim employee retention credits. As an example, when you actually go through the instructions, what the IRS actually wants to see there is all of the math and the calculation of how you arrived at the number that you arrived at. Again, it's something that I strongly recommend you work with a professional, even if it's not us, but someone that does this on a day in, day out basis and is very experienced on it. So if you do talk to your CPA, make sure to ask them how many times they filed these. There's a lot of rules around it. For example, you don't file quarter one returns. Those get taken on quarter two. And you really want to do this day in, day out to have a lot of experience on it. Couple words of wisdom. I mean, we've done this a lot of times. The first thing is we always tell everyone, don't try to disqualify yourself or try to determine in your own mind whether or not you qualify. I can comfortably say that every church in America qualifies for the ERC credits. I don't know any state that didn't have a order that limited capacity, or any church that didn't end up doing some sort of virtual services or other restrictions on a number of people and how worship happened. We also say don't try to calculate the credits yourself. There's a lot of complexity to it, especially if you have a PPP or second draw PPP loan. I know some of our competitors out there, kind of give instruction to clients, and then they have the clients try to do the calculations. We certainly don't think that that's the right approach. Our staff accountants will do all of the calculations and make sure that they're right, because they do it day in, day out. And certainly work with a professional. We would be delighted to assist anyone on this webinar with claiming the ERC credits. We are a contingency-based firm, so there's certainly no financial risk to your church. The easiest way to get in contact with us, my direct email is eric@stentam.com. So my firm name is Stenson Tamaddon, and I'm just eric@stentam.com. You could also send it to the broader group, which is just clients@stentam.com, and we would be delighted to assist you and figure out how it is that we can claim these credits for you and help you with any other needs that you have around stimulus funding as other programs become available. I hope that we were able to provide a good introduction to the employee retention credits, get people excited about what it is that $33,000 per employee could do for your institution, and the ways that you could use that in your ministry to expand your reach and help the community, bring out new sports programs, get new soccer balls, get new basketball courts, improve your facilities, do outreach to homeless, whatever it is that your ministry thinks is most important and where it wants to prioritize this money. Let's put this to good use. Let's get it. It's out there, and hopefully we can help you get those checks, and you all want to work with us. At this point, we'll open the floor to questions. I'm going to return the screen sharing to Judy and Church Executive, which will help moderate the Q&A session.
All right, well, thank you, Eric. That is really good information. We do have some attendee questions already, but yes, as he has said, please do submit your questions by way of the questions tab, because we do have some time to answer them. The first question, my church only has one employee, and that's me. Can my church qualify to participate in the PPP program?
Yeah, great question. So for one employee institutions, so the answer is yes, you could certainly qualify. We would want to make sure that there's wages available, and we'd highly recommend just contacting us at clients@stentam.com so that we can walk through and make sure that there's payroll that's available to use. And one of the things that I can say, particularly if you're a business administrator or a treasurer, and this is something that you need to discuss with your board or your senior leadership, we are willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement, access your payroll, and give you an initial analysis of how much money it is that your institution could get, so that you can have thorough and thoughtful discussions around whether or not the quote unquote proverbial juice is worth the squeeze to pursue these credits, and certainly it can, particularly as you have 40, 50 employees, it can make a very big difference.
Fantastic. We have another great question. So how many quarters can I claim in 2020?
A great question. So the ERC program started on March 13th, which is Q1. The IRS instructions say any credits that you want to take from Q1 to put on the Q2 return. So when we file returns for our clients, we file quarters 2, 3, and 4 for 2020, even though we're using wages that start in Q1 of 2020. For 2021, we're currently filing the first quarter of 2021, and as time passes, we will file quarters 2, 3, and 4, assuming that COVID continues to impact churches.
Fantastic. Just a reminder, you can submit questions using the chat feature. Another very good question. We file no annual tax return and have no UBI, so only payroll taxes are paid. Does this process still work?
So yes, phenomenal question. Thank you for whoever brought that up. So this particular credit and check that comes back to you is done against the payroll return. So you don't need to file an annual return. This was very intentional of Congress because they wanted to make sure that churches just like yours were able to claim these credits, and they knew that many of them don't file annual returns or annual returns are zero. So, and for those that deferred paying into Social Security, that's okay too. I don't want to get too technical here, but this is what's known as a fully refundable credit. A fully refundable credit means regardless of the amount of tax that you've actually paid, you get a check back for the full amount of the credit. So whether you've paid $0 in taxes or $1 million of taxes, if you're entitled to $100,000, you get a $100,000 check. I saw in the chat pop up, someone asked if we could disclose what our contingency fee is. So we are happy to talk to churches. We do have fairly standard pricing depending on the number of employees. Our fee ranges from 7.5% if you pay in full upfront to 10% if you want to go the contingency route where it's kind of pay on paid. We do have a very nominal deposit that we collect on the contingency, which ranges from $2,000 to $5,000 depending on the number of employees and the work effort of the scope of engagement. So hopefully that helps clarify that question.
It does. So, the next question is particular interest, of course, being that Stenson, Tamaddon, and Church Executive are both based in Phoenix. This person wants to talk about the viability of the ERC for a church in Arizona. This person says, I was under the impression that if our governor didn't stop churches from meeting as essential businesses.
Yeah, great question. And, by the way, Doug is a phenomenal governor and been a big supporter of his. So while it's true that churches are essential businesses, it was also true that there were capacity restrictions and guidance from the CDC around physical distancing and cleaning and sanitation. We would be happy to talk to you. We're here in Phoenix. We know the shutdown orders and the executive orders in Arizona very, very well. I actually personally attended probably about a half a dozen calls with Doug Ducey, our governor, as we discussed what those should look like. I was on kind of his business input group, and Dr. Chris from Arizona Department of Health Services. So happy to talk to you about how those orders impacted churches, and we can provide copies of those. And we're very comfortable with Arizona being a qualifying state.
Okay, we did have a question about the availability of this webinar. Do know, and we will cover this in a bit, that this will be available on our website to view again, possibly with your teams at your churches. So yeah, we will share that URL at the end of the webinar. The next question, just a real simple question. How do we get started with all this?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So the best way is to email clients at stentam, STENTAM.com. Just pass along your contact information. Let us know that you saw the Church Executive webinar. We certainly want to be able to thank Church Executive. And we'll walk you through the process. We have a very simple engagement letter. And once that's signed, our staff accountants will work with you through the whole process. So clients at stentam.com. I will also put our phone number in the chat box, 602-560-9393. If you have any questions, you can call myself or really anyone here, and we can answer those questions for you.
Okay, perfect. What is the deadline for applying for ERC credits?
Yeah, great question. So the current rules allow you to amend returns for up to 3 years. So there's a little bit of time. We tell people not to wait. So if you think about PPP, for example, the PPP program hasn't officially closed yet, but it's out of money. And so certainly the earlier that you get started with this, the better position that your ministry or your institution is going to be in terms of claiming money. And there is a little bit of a lag from the time that we file those returns, their paper returns, to when the check actually comes. It can take 12 to 16 weeks for that to happen. So you certainly want to get started on this so that you can get those claimed.
Perfect. Do individuals who are paid on a 1099 basis count?
So unfortunately, no 1099s are available. So if you're paying a minister or if you have a musician that you're paying on a 1099 basis, those wages would not count. Only people that are actually employed by your institution and receiving W-2 wages can we collect against.
Okay, we have one more question here, but if anybody has any final questions for our panelists, we do still have about 20 minutes to work with. So feel free to submit those by way of the chat button. How do I get in contact with your firm? I think you talked about this before, but let's go over it again.
Yep, so the best way is email clients, CLIENTS, at stentam, STENTAM.com, so clients at stentam.com, or you can call us at 602-560-9393. So a couple questions I see. Does housing allowance pay count? I think so, but I don't know. So let me answer that offline, and we will get the answer to that. I would have to look through the rules. That was a question from Matt Sidwell. Matt, if you want to provide us or send us an email, I will check the rules on that because I don't want to give you the wrong information.
Okay, and if we receive any questions after the fact, we will share them with the Stenson Tamaddon team, and I'm sure we will connect you. Beyond that, I think it is about time to sign off.
Well, thank you. Thank you all very, very much, and I hope everyone has a blessed day.
And this is Judy Victor. I want to thank you, Eric, very much for the terrific presentation. And thanks to each of you in the audience for attending our webinar, Employee Retention Credits, ERC, and COVID Stimulus for Churches. We hope this webinar has been an insightful resource for you and your ministries. The presentation has been recorded, as Rayanne mentioned earlier, and it will be available for download within 24 hours, and that will be on our website. You'll see the URL on your screen right now, www.churchexecutive.com/webinars. Make sure that's plural, webinars. On behalf of Stenson Tamaddon and Church Executive, thank you very much for attending.